Maybe we could talk about just like how you got your start into making art and making paintings. Were you making paintings from like the time you were a kid?
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't really get into painting until I was like maybe 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
I always drew. And I still draw, and just always really enjoyed it. And then started to play around more with watercolors and a little bit of acrylic when I was like 13 or so. And then 14, had an oil painting class in high school and liked that. And then my parents knew a local painter who was trained in a classical way, who did figure drawing and figure painting at his studio here in Salt Lake. And I just started going to those things and learning how to do, proper drawing and proper painting. And his technique was a very sort of pared down, not minimalistic, but you could tell he was classically trained, but he was such a spare person in terms of like, his name was Earl Jones, great painter. He's still around. And he just had a very deft, economical way of getting things right the first time, often with the underpainting. And then using glazes, usually like with liquid as the medium, to allow the brilliance of the canvas, the gesso, to come through in a lot of cases. And I just always appreciated his like freshness and luminosity. And I've tried to maintain that kind of level of chromatic glow that I like in his work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started learning pretty early, 14, 15, I got pretty into it, and had some time during those years to like go and geek out in museums a lot and really kind of get up close to paintings and just try to figure out how they were made and what the approach was and which things were done first. And I still like that. Like in a way, I'm kind of hoping, other people will come up to my work and get up really close and have the same kind of satisfaction that I took from some of those pieces.
Yeah.
So I guess after the teen years with the high school art teachers, and then the separate work with Earl Jones, then I went to the University of Utah art department, did painting and drawing. And they still had a pretty strong like figurative tradition. Mm-hmm. The guy that had taught Earl Jones, Alvin Gittins, was like a Royal Academy trained portraitist.
Nice.
Who did a lot of famous people. And so there was still the legacy among a lot of even though he had died like in the early 80s, yeah. A lot of the people that he had trained that had become graduate students or whatever were still around teaching. And so there was still a lot of that approach. But it was changing, and all the, the 90s postmodern, I don't know. It was a messy time.
Yeah.
It was just a weird time. I now looking back, I think the stuff that I was doing privately in my own apartment was like a lot more akin to what I'm doing now, and was really like just more authentic. But at the time it was like, there was just all this sort of like early 90s deconstructive posturing, and I don't know. I kind of got lost there for a while. It took me a while to kind of get back into my own jam.
Yeah. Were you just trying to follow like the trend of the time? Did you get caught up in that kind of a thing? Or?
Yeah, it just felt like, I had briefly kind of a mentor that I stayed in touch with, David Amico, who was in the LA art scene, and he's still, I think, doing stuff down there, and he's influenced a lot of people who I really admire, and I really like his work too. But it definitely was way more LA, way more kind of postmodern, deconstructed, make your own narrative kind of stuff. And so, even though I think I learned a lot from like things about how maybe the art world works, or what people will be willing to consider in the established art market, especially at the higher echelons. yeah, it was, I got some really good feedback and some good training there, but I think it also continued to kind of push me off my own native qualities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cause I think, like psychedelic art is still kind of outre and still a little forbidden and
Mm-hmm.
still a little bit kind of dismissed, um, along with the entire topic of psychedelic medicine for that matter and other uses. But it's coming around.